Okay, so this is a 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro. And now this is a 2016 15-inch MacBook Pro, and here's a 12-inch MacBook, here's a 13-inch MacBook 2016, a 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro. So yeah, a bunch of MacBooks. And the MacBooks are just great. They have amazing build quality. They actually have the best build quality on any laptop on the market. They also have amazing speakers, actually the best speakers on any laptop on the market. They're also really fluid, they have amazing battery life, and also amazing performance. But there are a few things that Apple doesn't want you to know when it comes to their MacBooks. So here are a few pretty major things that might change your opinion when it comes to Apple's MacBooks. So grab some popcorn. This is going to be a pretty interesting and controversial video, and a pretty informative video for most of you. So grab some popcorn or some snacks or whatever and enjoy. Okay, so let's say that you want to buy a MacBook. Now you can actually choose between quite a few models for each MacBook model. You can choose different configurations with different clock speeds, and then obviously the higher the clock speed that you choose, the higher the performance that you're going to get. And also the price is going to be higher as well. Okay, now all MacBooks feature turbo boosting. So what's turbo boosting? So for example, for the most expensive MacBook Pro, the 15-inch one, this one comes with a quad-core processor, 3.1 GHz, and this one can actually turbo boost, so increase its frequency when it needs to up to 4.1 GHz. So a pretty big difference from 3.1 to 4.1. But something that Apple never mentions is that even though this is a quad-core processor, the one on the 15-inch MacBook Pro, not all 4 cores will be reaching 4.1 GHz. So if you know anything about processors, you already know this. But if you don't, then you probably didn't know this because Apple doesn't specify this. So in reality, only one core will be able to reach the 4.1 GHz speed. Not all 4 cores, just one. And same applies to the upcoming iMac Pro. So if you go on Apple's website, oh wow, 18 cores up to 4.5 gigahertz. It kind of makes you think that you get 18 cores at 4.5 gigahertz, and a lot of people actually think that this is true, but it's not. Instead, you only get one core, most likely, at 4.5 gigahertz, and the rest will be around 2.5 or 2.7 gigahertz or so. Moving on to number 2, this is actually a pretty big one. So now you know that only one core can get to Apple's promised turbo boost frequency. But did you also know that it will never ever get to that frequency? Not even that one core. No, you won't be getting that frequency. Wait, what? Well, I've tested this on about 7 different MacBooks, and neither of them actually got to Apple's promised boost clock. Now, this is actually because of something called thermal throttling. So you might have noticed that with each generation of MacBooks, Apple makes them thinner and thinner. So for example, my 2.9 GHz 2017 15-inch MacBook Pro, which should turbo boost to a frequency of 3.9 GHz on, by the way, just one core, that one never got past 3.5 GHz ever. And even 3.5 GHz was like hitting the jackpot, you know. So it only happened a few times when I ran some benchmarks just right after boot, so to say. So when my MacBook was still cold. Now, this is not that big of an issue with a 15-inch MacBook Pro because this one is already pretty powerful. But this is definitely going to be an issue with a 12-inch MacBook. So my 12-inch MacBook comes with a 1.2 GHz processor, which can turbo boost to up to 3.0 GHz. Now, obviously that never happens. So in fact, it stays at about 1.2 GHz most of the time, sometimes 1.1, 1.0, and sometimes even lower because, you know, it doesn't have any fans. So when it heats up, it actually has to slow down the clock speed in order for the processor to cool down. So if you want to test this out yourself, download the Intel Power Gadget. I left the link for this in the description box down below. It's free, by the way. So go ahead and do something processor intensive, like exporting a video or just run some benchmarks and see if your clock speed ever reaches the advertised clock speed that you paid for. Most likely not. So my advice for this would be the following. Always buy your MacBook based on the base frequency and not the turbo boost frequency, because it will never ever reach that frequency. That's unless you have an iMac or the Mac Pro, because those actually have a better cooling system, quite a bit better than the MacBooks, and the processor gets closer to the Mac's turbo boost frequency. Not exactly up to that frequency, but pretty close. Then number 3, with the 2016 MacBook Pros, Apple switched to a new generation of keyboards. So this was the second generation butterfly mechanism. The first one was in the 12-inch MacBook, the 2015 one, and now with the 2016 MacBook Pros, we got the second generation butterfly mechanism keyboard. Now, unfortunately, there were a lot of issues with this keyboard. So lots of users, including myself, had this issue in which the keys had this sticky clicking noise. So when they got hot, they made this weird noise. Some of the keys were significantly louder than the other ones. So this didn't happen to all the keys, just a few of them. And the issue would, by the way, disappear mostly when your MacBook cooled down. Now, aside from this, the keys, they did feel a bit better than the 2015 12-inch MacBook, which came with a first generation butterfly mechanism, but not by much. So I still find it really difficult to type on the 2016 MacBook, because there's little to no feedback, no tactile feedback, so it's really difficult to type on this thing. But it turns out that Apple did indeed fix most of the keyboard issues with the 2017 MacBook Pro, even though they haven't said anything about it. So with the 2017 MacBook Pros, Apple apparently added a new keycap underneath each of the keys, so they're a bit more raised now, and this not only makes them easier to type on because, they're a bit clickier now, but I didn't have any sticky noise, clicky noise issues with the 2017 MacBook Pro. So by the way, this is actually my third MacBook Pro. I had a lot of issues with the 2016 one, and Apple finally replaced the second replacement with the 2017 model, which actually solved all of my keyboard issues. So therefore, if you can, definitely get a 2017 model, because I can definitely feel an improvement when it comes to the keyboard, and so can hundreds of other users on the Mac Rumors forums, for example. Now, number 4, this is a pretty controversial one. So remember when Apple introduced the 12-inch MacBook back in 2015, they also introduced a new battery design. So instead of using blocks of battery like they did in previous models, they developed a stacked battery. So sheets of battery essentially that would go into every single empty space inside the MacBook. So this way you would get a much higher battery capacity in essentially the same form factor, so no empty space would be wasted. And back in 2016, when Apple introduced the new redesigned MacBook Pros, I was actually surprised that they didn't come with Apple's new battery design. Instead, they actually featured the same old blocks design from the 2012 Retina MacBook Pro's design. Wait, what? So that's why the battery life was so bad. But why did Apple do that? Why didn't they use the stacked battery model design inside the 2016 MacBook Pros? Well, Bloomberg, they actually got some inside sources, and they got some inside look at this. And here's what Bloomberg had to say. Apple engineers wanted to use higher capacity battery packs shaped to the insides of the laptop, so basically the stacked batteries, versus the standard square cells found in most machines. So that design would have boosted battery life. In the run-up to the MacBook Pro's planned debut this year, the new battery failed a key test, according to a person familiar to the situation. Rather than delay the launch and risk missing the crucial holiday shopping season, Apple decided to revert to an older design, and basically this change required roping in engineers from the other teams to finish the job, meaning that work on other Macs languished, the person said. The new laptop didn't represent a game-changing leap in battery performance, and a software bug misrepresented hours of power remaining. So Apple has since removed the meter from the top right hand side corner of the screen, and a few more reports have said that Apple also decided to go back to the old design because they wanted to release the 2016 MacBook Pro ahead of the holiday season, basically to boost sales, which would have been delayed if they decided to include a stacked battery design, by the way. And finally, the 2016 MacBook Pros had lots of issues that Apple never acknowledged. So, for example, I went to 3 different MacBooks until, I found one that didn't have that many issues. So my 2 MacBook Pros had this popping noise issue in which the case randomly popped, like really loud, every 20 minutes or so. And interesting enough, you could even hear this in some of my older videos, because I was using my MacBook Pro, by the way, to record my voiceovers on. And this is a major issue. Thousands of users have reported this popping noise issue, and I spoke with Apple regarding this, and they said that they are investigating this internally. But if you are experiencing this issue and you go to the Apple Store, Apple won't replace your MacBook because of that, and there's no fixing it. So Apple won't fix your MacBook or replace it because of this issue. You need to have a different issue for them to replace or repair your MacBook. So if you have this issue and you're within your 14 days return policy, definitely get it replaced ASAP. And then besides this case popping noise issue, I've also had a lot of other issues. So for example, the speaker actually broke, like randomly the speaker broke, only to find the second speaker on my MacBook Pro break like a week after. And besides this, we also have slow SSD speeds on some models. We also have a hinge noise that's pretty loud on some models. Not even to mention the keyboard sticky noise issue, the clicking noise issue, and many more issues. So I personally had a 10 plus issues list when I went to the Apple Store to get my MacBook Pro 15-inch fixed. Now, I know most people won't really care about a popping noise issue, but when you're spending so much on a laptop, enough to pretty much get an entry-level car, then I personally want every single part of it to be perfect. I mean, it has to be perfect, right? Which was definitely not the case with my 2016 MacBook Pro. Now, the 2017 MacBook Pro, interesting enough, this one came only 8 months after the 2016's MacBook Pro release, which was pretty interesting. And usually Apple waits about 12 months or 14 months before releasing an updated model. So it's a bit unusual that Apple upgraded the 2016 model this quickly. Now, the 2017 model, it did fix most of the issues with the 2016 one. So there we go. The 2016 one was mostly a beta product. So the 2017 one isn't perfect yet because, by the way, it still doesn't have a stacked battery design. So it still uses the same 2012 battery design, not the new one. And finally, number 6, as a bonus one, the SSD read and write speeds are actually significantly lower in macOS High Sierra with the new APFS or Apple proprietary file system. And this is actually the case, especially if you enable Firewall, so the encryption. So previously I was getting close to 3 gigabytes per second when it comes to read speeds, which is very close to Apple's claimed 3.2 gigabytes per second. But now I'm barely getting 2 gigabytes per second. So a significant decrease, which Apple never mentions on their website. Okay, so lots of stuff that I really wanted to mention. So what's the conclusion in all this? Well, overall, the MacBook Pro 2016 and the 2017 is still a great device. But it's not a perfect company. It's not a perfect device. Even if this is Apple and they do have the best build quality on any laptop, even their almost 4,000 pounds MacBook Pro, even that one can still have a ton of issues. And Apple is nowhere near the customer support level of Amazon, for example, which would immediately replace your product after a single issue. So I've waited actually since May 2017 to get my MacBook Pro fixed. And it basically took Apple 4 months to try and fix it, and finally they replaced it with a 2017 model, 4 months after. So in the end, here's the thing, you should always check your MacBook for any issues when you buy it. Any display issues, popping noise issues, dead pixels, speaker issues, keyboard issues, and if you find anything, replace it immediately because you only have 14 days to do so. After which, fixing it is going to be a pain because yes, Apple's Mac policy is very different from their iPhone policy. But yeah, there you go, a pretty interesting video. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more interesting in-depth videos like this one, and also enable notifications so that you're notified whenever a new video comes out. Let me know in the comments if you've had any issues with your MacBook, and if you had some issues with your MacBook, what kind of issues and what did you do to get them fixed? I'm really curious to reading your comments on this. Other than that, if you have enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like to let me know. And yeah, other than that, this has been pretty much it. So thank you for watching. I'm Daniel, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Zone of Tech, signing out. Cheers.